kind of uphold these principles. One of the things that we've done is we have a petition out there that we have a few thousand signatures from folks who are telling President Obama, you know, the new alliance is just the wrong initiative. It's the wrong direction for what Africa needs and what you want your legacy to be. And what we're hoping is that we'll have a significant number of signatures that we can present to the right official. We have some targets within the US administration, and then kind of engage in that conversation. The New Alliance conversation tends to happen a lot on the ground and not as much in the US because that's where it's taking place. You know, it's kind of like this ambiguous, unclear initiative where they're taking money from here, putting it there, and they're going to communities, they're talking to them, and they're saying, well, we want this to be called the New Alliance, and we want you to start implementing these policies, you know, to start opening up your land and be asking the national government to do these things. So it's very amorphous, and it's something that's happening on the ground. But in the US, there's definitely a few organizations that are interested in New Alliance, and actually is one of them kind of working with this issue. I wanted to say that a very interesting thing is that USAID on its website about a year ago put up a notice saying that African American communities in Virginia had been using the voluntary guidelines as a means to protect their rights, their land rights, because they had the land for a number of years. The title was somewhat unclear, and they used these voluntary guidelines in order to uphold their right, and you know, they got applause from their own government for doing that. So it is not a completely useless instrument. It lacks teeth, but it was made so that we can actually put teeth in it. In terms of, so that's my example of how what can be used, and I think you're absolutely right. The communities that tend to be impacted the most tend to fall along a particular spectrum, and I think that this is something that needs to be talked about more openly. And I think that in many ways, when the connection is made that way, it will really embolden the U.S. to kind of take a step in the right direction, because people right here at home are linking their concerns to the concerns of people in Africa.
Activists on the continent and also experts in development are making the case, saying that small farm holders empowerment is the way forward. The large-scale agribusiness that would not do much to resolve any issue of food security for the African continent. The small farmer holders have been feeding Africans for a long time. What they need is to be empowered so that they can improve. And how can they improve? It's better conditions. If government is working properly, then the investment will be made, and the improvement, the scientific knowledge will come about, and then they can do what they need to do. That has been known for a long time, but African leaders, they can even learn that. They can practice that. More guidelines and more meetings and staying in nice hotels and going everywhere. No one is interested in that. Honestly, we know where to go. We are not going there. On the question what to do, where do we go from here? When you look at the victims today, are those countries where the democratic process has never took root. So advocating for democracy in these countries is step number one as a general umbrella. When people are empowered, then they will be part of the solutions, and they will be able to improve their lives. Now, we use land grab as one of the many stories of victimization. Africa Patent Justice Network takes on this story to just show how the West is continuing to just really be a problem for Africa. And what we don't want is the Americans to be part of the neo-colonialism in Africa. So if you have investment in your in a company here and there, tell them that, is my money going to in land grab? And if yes, say you are not willing to participate in the oppression of the African people. Congresswoman Maxine Waters, when we were discussing the conflict mineral, some lawmakers were saying, oh, the law that was passed is going to hurt American business. And Congresswoman Maxine Waters said, and so what? America knows what to do, and we should not compromise our values. All the Chinese, we go there and be part of them, let them do what they do. And we're going to do what we need to do. And maybe we can use our standards when we are negotiating different deals and commercial deals. That's how we live. So we, as Africa Faith and Justice Network, would be interested in identifying, or you also help your financial advisors identify where your money is. And our wonderful intern, Joe, worked on a paper, and he identified some American companies that are involved in land grab. So look at those and give that list to your financial advisor and say, look, I don't like my money to go in this. And the other step is to through legislation. The conflict mineral law that was enacted in 2010 has produced extraordinary results, whereas American companies are required to make public whether the product they have include conflict minerals from the Democratic Republic of Congo and surrounding countries. And that put really a break on their what they were doing, financing practically massacre in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So a law like that can also give the companies a little bit of time out and provide room for activists in the communities to also organize and understand what the issue at hand is. I guess that is all. Thank you.
Briefly, I think, I'm trying to be brief. I think one thing in terms of what we can do, I mean, I think we need to keep building alliances, including across countries, across continents. There was a panelist this morning that mentioned that there was a group that they found that the same company was behind exploitation in Zambia and UK. And so they united groups in both places to fight that same company. So I mean, I think there's a lot of picture for that. Gentrification was mentioned over here. It reminds me as well as Karen Washington, actually another winner of the James Beard Leadership Award. At a recent conference, she said, you know, don't call it food deserts. I don't know anyone who lives in the desert. If you wanted to call it something, call it by what it really is, food apartheid. And so I think there's a lot of room for that struggle to also be part of the common shared struggle in language. And I think that one of the really hard things that we have to do when we do that, though, is I think we need to start prioritizing and focusing in on some set of issues that we're going to be a movement, which is what's going to take to change things. We're really going to prioritize and channel funds and support to the people on the grounds fighting those battles. And that's tough. I was told a joke in graduate school: if you get 3 Marxists in a room, they'll form fourth winter groups. But I think we need to have focus and figure out what our priorities are and really act in solidarity, including with resources, on those issues.
We can take these 2 more questions, but in case, I'm sorry, 3. Because you in the back. Before, in case folks need to leave, and we are running just about to the limits of our time together, I wanted to let everyone know that the final session will take place in room 155. I believe it says on our programs that it will happen in the gallery lounge. So if you need to leave before we finish here, just know that that's where the final session will take place. So we'll actually start in the back.
I just want to pick up on the last 2 comments, which I think are really important. Jacques said, check where your money is. Find out from your advisors where your money is. And you were talking about also, Jackie was saying not just to use policy tools, but also that kind of movement building that uses all of our tools. So one thing that we did learn from the anti-apartheid movement is that it is possible for small people to move big money. And in the case of food justice work and food sovereignty, it is possible not only to take your money and your church's money, your congregations, your campus's money out of the bad companies, it is also possible to put it into organizations that are investing in cooperatives, whether they're in Mississippi or Malawi, in organizations that are doing work to move banks to invest in smallholder farmers and in sustainable economies. Shared Interest, the organization that I work with, is one of a number of that kind of community investment organizations that is proactively putting money into the hands of smallholder farmers, because even if they get right to use the land, you can easily fail. The best reforms in the world can fail if people don't have working capital and end up selling their land back to the people who took it from them in the first place. So in looking at investment strategies, I would encourage people not only to look at what not to invest in, but those kinds of community and impact investments that are investing proactively.
Yeah, we did. In the back.
Yeah. Mine is well, the issue of the land grab in Africa, as my colleague there said, is quite an emerging threat to the challenges of small farmers. But I'm really wondering whether we have put enough pressure to our leaders and our allies in the north to try to see how we can address that problem. And this problem has started actually becoming pronounced for the last 5 years, and mostly driven by these international conventions like the Climate Change Convention, which is encouraging investment by northern and emerging economies to countries like Africa. And this has led, we have noticed a country like Ethiopia, where around 1 million acres of land have been grabbed. And that has been facilitated simply because there is really a enabling environment for that land grab. There are no policies and framework to protect farmers' land. And the government, very quickly, because it's a very autocratic regime, will go and dislocate people without nobody questioning. I've seen even activists in Ethiopia who just want to question, you not only are locked in, you disappear. And even building that movement you are talking about, it can even thrive here more than there, because you are really confronting very, very strong economic forces which can muzzle and kill. And this is not on Ethiopia. Where I come from in Kenya, we have seen companies from Middle East and those others now with growing appetite for land. And what do? They hide behind the Climate Change Convention because they want to grow food for their citizens. And this is acceptable. So they ask, even if you question, they say they are going to grow food. And this is not food meant for the people from Kenya who every time rely on relief food because they are not able to grow food, but it's because now they want to grow food, rice for their and then they get ready land. And so now the way forward here then would be, we agree with the movement building in the north, but how far will that go? If the activists and the movements which are growing in Africa, most of the people now, you are arrested, and now you are accused of terrorism and those others, because every time now, in fact, the muzzling of the civil society, it's very easy for Ethiopian government to say these are terrorists, a Kenyan government to say these are terrorists. But because now this is the international threat, the American government will not care because you are not going to touch a terrorist. So these are the challenges which we are facing, and we need to devise new and creative ways to address it in a very practical way. We may be talking here, but when you go, in fact now, it has become quite difficult for the civil society movement in Africa 20 years ago than it is here. because of these anti-terrorism legislations, which have got traction with countries which were traditionally supported